There comes a moment when everything falls apart, not because you're weak, but because your soul is tired of pretending. In that chaos, something ancient begins to stir within you, a truth deeper than words, buried beneath layers of masks, fear, and forgotten dreams. That's the beginning of awakening. This message is not just about healing, it's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Stay until the end. Because the clarity you seek may just lie in the very parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Certainly. Below is the expanded speech covering key points 1, 2, and 3 in the style of Carl Jung, with deep educational and motivational insights. The tone is reflective, symbolic, and emotionally engaging, with no ending statements. As it is part of a continued structure, chaos is not simply disorder. It is the primal state of potential before form takes shape. It is the womb of transformation. Most people fear it because it threatens the illusion of control. But to the soul, chaos is a signal. It means that the false structures are beginning to dissolve, and something deeper is ready to emerge. One must not view the disintegration of their current self as a mistake. It is, in truth, an initiation, a passage that strips away the superficial, to confront you with the fundamental question, who are you, really? In the moment where your life no longer makes sense, where certainty collapses, and the ego begins to tremble, a sacred opportunity appears. Most run. They medicate the discomfort. They seek distraction. They cling to old narratives even as they rot in their hands. But a few, the courageous ones, pause and listen. They lean in. Because something in them recognizes that what is crumbling is not their life, but the false self they constructed to survive. The self that was born not from the depths of their being, but from the need to be accepted, to be loved, to be safe in a world that demanded conformity. It is in the fire of chaos that the true self is forged, not the self as defined by roles, images, or achievements, but the self as the totality of being conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, wounded and whole. That self does not emerge through logic alone. It emerges through experience, through suffering, through confrontation with the very things you were taught to avoid. It calls you to descend, not to despair, but into the inner world you've long ignored. When life feels like it is falling apart, consider this. Perhaps it is falling together in a way your surface mind cannot yet comprehend. Perhaps the confusion is not a detour, but the very terrain you must walk through to find yourself. And in that walk, every false belief about who you thought you had to be will begin to fall away. You will no longer be able to pretend. You will no longer be able to perform. And that, though terrifying, is liberation. Because only when the lie collapses can the truth begin to breathe. We all carry within us a collection of masks. These masks are not worn maliciously. They are crafted over time in response to our environment. From early childhood, we learn quickly what parts of ourselves are acceptable and which are not. We adapt, we edit, we contort, and little by little, we build a persona of social masks that helps us navigate the world while hiding our true emotions and desires. We become the pleaser, the achiever, the caregiver, the strong one, the intellectual. Each role is an attempt to gain love, approval, or safety. But eventually, the mask becomes a prison. You may find yourself playing a role so convincingly that you forget it is a role. You may succeed in the eyes of the world and yet feel a deep inner emptiness that no amount of praise or accomplishment can fill. That emptiness is the space between the person you've become and the soul you've forgotten. It is a signal, not of failure, but of truth-seeking entrance. The mask may keep you safe, but it also keeps you distant from others and from yourself. The tension between the mask and the true self creates inner conflict. You smile when you want to cry. You say yes when your soul screams no. You stay silent when your truth wants to speak. This inner split fractures the psyche. The longer you maintain the illusion, the more exhausted you become. You begin to wonder why you are so tired, so numb, so lost. But the real question is this: how long have you been carrying a version of yourself that was never yours to begin with? To move toward clarity, the mask must come off. And this is not a one-time event, it is a process, a shedding. With each layer removed, something more authentic emerges. You may feel vulnerable, even naked, without your familiar identity. But this is the beginning of seeing, of being seen not as a projection, but as a person. The process requires deep honesty. You must ask yourself, who am I when I am not trying to impress? Who am I when there is nothing to prove? Who am I when I stop hiding? And what you'll find may surprise you. Beneath the layers of performance, there is a vast, unfiltered, the self that longs to live, to express, to connect not through perfection, but through presence. This self is not always polished. It is raw, emotional, even contradictory. But it is real. And only the real can lead you to meaning. Yet, even as you remove the mask, you will find that not all of you feels ready to be revealed. There are parts you've buried, not because they were inauthentic, but because they were deemed unacceptable. The anger, the jealousy, the grief, the desire, all of these emotions live in what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is the rejected self, the aspects of your being that you've disowned in order to survive the world's judgment. And yet, within that shadow lies the very vitality you seek. We are taught from a young age to suppress our darker emotions. We're told to be polite, to be agreeable, to be calm, even when the world wounds us. But emotions do not vanish. They sink. They grow roots in the unconscious. And from there, they influence our behavior in hidden, sometimes destructive ways. The person who suppresses anger may become passive-aggressive or explode unpredictably. The one who denies their sadness may lose empathy for others. What we refuse to face in ourselves becomes the unseen force that shapes our destiny. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It holds your creativity, your passion, your intuition, your authenticity. To confront it is to reclaim your lost power. It is to turn toward the parts of yourself you were taught to fear and say, I see you. I will no longer exile you. This is the beginning of integration. Facing the shadow is uncomfortable. It requires humility. It reveals that you are not only capable of light, but also of darkness. That you are not purely virtuous, nor purely flawed, but both. And in that acknowledgement, something radical happens. You become whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means nothing is denied. It means your strength and your vulnerability, your logic and your emotion, your brilliance and your brokenness all have a place within you. The more you integrate your shadow, the more you step into authenticity. You stop living a double life. You no longer need to maintain the illusion of being good at the expense of being real. You begin to relate to others from a place of depth, not performance. And this invites others to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your honesty becomes healing not only for you, but for those around you. The journey inward is not easy. It demands that you break the spell of who you were told to be and instead listen for the quiet voice of who you actually are. It asks you to stand still in your chaos, remove your mask, and greet your shadow not with shame, but with curiosity. In doing so, you will discover a truth that cannot be given by others. Only uncovered by you, a truth that was there all along, waiting, in the silence beneath your pretending. And this is only the beginning. The self has more to say, more to reveal. If you are willing to keep walking into the mystery, the next steps will unfold not as instructions, but as invitations. Invitations to return to the forgotten, to integrate the exiled, to awaken the dormant truth that still breathes beneath your scars. The process continues, because you are not a finished product. You are a becoming. You are a soul remembering its shape. Certainly, below is the continuation of the speech, expanding key points 4, 5, and 6 in approximately 2,000 words. The style remains true to Carl Jung's reflective, symbolic, and psychologically rich, tone educational and motivational, deeply introspective, with continuous flow and no conclusive ending. When one begins to acknowledge what lies beneath the surface of the persona, when the shadow has been met, not with resistance but with reverence, something profound starts to occur, a slow and steady movement toward wholeness. This is not wholeness in the way the world defines it, polished, curated, perfect, but a deeper unity, a reconciliation of the inner opposites that once seemed to be in conflict. The conscious mind begins to see the unconscious, not as a threat, but as a companion. The goal is not to eliminate the darkness, but to bring it into dialogue with the light. Where once there was fracture, now there is tension, but creative tension, purposeful tension. Integration does not erase the complexities of the self. It gives them a home. To integrate is to stop running from the forgotten parts of yourself and begin the lifelong labor of welcoming them in. It is the reweaving of what was split. The adult learns to speak to the wounded child within. The rational mind learns to listen to the intuitive heart. The fierce, protective parts soften in the presence of self-compassion. You begin to sense that you are more than a collection of roles and strategies. You are a system of living symbols, each one expressing a fragment of your deeper nature. The more of yourself you allow into consciousness, the richer your experience becomes, not necessarily easier, but more alive. Yet integration is not only an inward process, it transforms the way you relate to the outer world. You no longer need to project your denied aspects onto others, seeing in them what you have refused to see in yourself. You become less reactive, more grounded. Your relationships deepen, not because you've become better, but because you've become more real. You stop seeking validation from the outside and begin trusting your own inner compass. You realize that the people you once tried to please were often reflecting back your own disowned desires. The more you become yourself, the less approval you need. And it is at this threshold that the wound makes itself known, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It may have been silent for years, operating beneath awareness. It may have shown up in patterns, in relationships, in recurring conflicts that left you feeling powerless. But now, with clearer eyes and a more open heart, you see it for what it is, not a mistake, but a message. The wound, contrary to popular belief, is not the end of your strength, it is the beginning of it. The pain you carry is not random, it carries within it the seeds of your awakening. What you suffered, you did not choose, but what you do with that suffering, that is the birth of personal responsibility. You can bury the wound, armor it, deny it, but it will remain there, speaking through your behaviors, your anxieties, your hesitations. Or you can face it directly, with courage and care, and ask it what it has come to teach. This is not easy. To sit with your pain rather than escape it is to stand on sacred ground. It is a sacred task, one that asks everything of you, and yet gives you back something the world never could. Meaning, pain is the great revealer. It strips you down to what matters. It exposes your illusions, your dependencies, your false attachments. It invites you to grow, not in spite of it, but through it. The same fire that scorched you also contains the light that can guide you. The question is not whether you will experience pain. The question is whether you will allow it to become your passage toward wisdom. Will you become bitter, or will you become deep? Will you shrink, or will you unfold? There is no transformation without a confrontation with your wound. And this is where many stop on the edge of pain, looking in. But for those who go further, something astonishing happens. The wound begins to open into insight. You begin to see the purpose behind your path, not intellectually, but viscerally. The betrayal that shattered your trust taught you how to draw boundaries. The loss that hollowed you out carved a space for compassion. The failure that humiliated you birthed a new humility and depth. Slowly, you begin to realize that your suffering has shaped your soul. But even then, the journey is not complete, because now, you stand before a deeper mystery or a purpose. Not the one the world suggests. Not a career, not an image, not a title. Something older. Something embedded in the very fibers of your being. And often, paradoxically, this purpose is hidden in the very places you've tried not to look. The things you avoid, the fears you repress, the dreams you dismiss as foolish. These are not obstacles. They are clues. They are the breadcrumbs scattered by your deeper self, guiding you back to what you've forgotten. The irony is profound. What you thought was your weakness turns out to be your calling. What you were most ashamed of becomes the very place your strength emerges from. The longing you buried under layers of logic is the signal that you were made for something you have not yet allowed yourself to imagine. The parts you've rejected are not distractions from your path, they are the path. Purpose is not something you manufacture. It is something you remember. It is encoded in your very being. Not as a rigid plan, but as a living pulse. And the more aligned you become with your inner truth, the more this purpose begins to reveal itself, not all at once, but piece by piece, moment by moment. You find yourself saying yes to things that once terrified you. You find yourself drawn to conversations that crack you open. You notice synchronicities, not as coincidences, but as confirmations that your soul is leading the way. You do not need to understand your entire purpose at once. You only need to begin honoring what calls to you, what stirs you, what refuses to let you go. These signals are often quiet, subtle, easily dismissed, but they persist. And if you give them your attention, they will grow louder. Your life, once shaped by reaction and survival, begins to be shaped by choice and clarity. You start to feel, not just think, that you are on the right path. Not because it is easy, but because it is true. There will still be doubt, there will still be fear. But they no longer control you. They no longer paralyze you. They become part of the conversation, no longer tyrants, but companions. You walk with them, not against them. And that is the essence of inner freedom. Your task, then, is not to create a perfect life, but to live a real one. A life in which your inner and outer worlds begin to reflect each other. A life in which you are not driven by the need to appear successful, but by the desire to be aligned. A life where you no longer abandon yourself to be accepted. A life where you make space for silence, for reflection, for wonder. A life where you trust that your deepest questions are not signs of failure, but of becoming. In this unfolding, the clarity you once chased begins to rise naturally, not as something external to reach for, but as something internal that you begin to embody. You become more than a seeker. You become a vessel through which something ancient and eternal expresses itself. And as you do, the world around you begins to shift, not because you've changed it, but because you've changed your relationship with it. This is the sacred movement from chaos to clarity, not a straight line, but a spiral, a return to what was lost, a descent into what was denied, a rise into what was always waiting to be lived. The self does not demand perfection. It asks for participation, for presence, for authenticity. And the more of yourself you bring into the light, the more whole you become, not just for yourself, but for the world that needs what only your soul can offer.